Welcome back to another episode of Palisade Radio. This is your host, Colin Cattell. On the show with us today is a new guest to the program, Gerardo Del Real. He's the editor of Junior Mining Monthly and Junior Mining Trader, also co-owner of Resource Stock Digest. Gerardo, welcome to the program.
Colin, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm a longtime listener. It's good to be on this side of it.
Great. Well, listen, I want to talk to you starting off about the volatility that we've seen this week. On the back of the U.S. dollar showing weakness for the last few months, we now have the Dow had a couple days, crash days. It's, of course, recovering a bit. We'll see what plays out over the next few days. But general market perspective, what do you think's going on? Is this bull market in the Dow going to continue?
You know, well, first off, I absolutely believe the bull market in the Dow continues, but nothing goes straight up, right? And so I joked the other day that this recent volatility was a way for the markets to scare millennials out of the market. And the reason I made that joke was because I had my younger brother constantly texting me for 2 days, asking about his 401k and asking about ETFs and asking about volatility. And this is someone who never reaches out to me for financial advice. So, you know, I sent him a chart, a 2-year chart of the Dow, and I told him he should be thankful for what that chart looked like. And frankly, I believe that's going to continue for the next several years. So I think the volatility is healthy. I think a correction is healthy. I do believe it's just that. I think that we're going to see a couple of months of the market testing the new Fed chair. And then I think we're back to new highs to the dismay of, you know, many of the perma-bears out there.
Fair enough. Were you surprised at all about the action that we saw in gold? Oftentimes when the Dow sells off, the gold and gold stocks really get hit hard too. And surprisingly, the other day, gold maintained, and the stocks, the associated stocks, were not down very much.
You know, they weren't down very much, Colin, but they also weren't up, right? Gold caught a small bid, but every time that we've had a material event, be it Brexit, the election of Donald Trump, right, or this most recent scare, even with North Korea, gold has failed to surpass that key 1370, mid-1370s resistance. And I think until we get through that, I don't see a significant new bull market in gold just yet. I think we're getting close, but I've long said, I've said this for about a year and a half. I probably sound like a broken record to many people that are familiar with my opinions. I believe we need one last breakdown before the next leg up, and so I'm hoping that we get that in the next few months. I think that this dollar pullback recently is kind of a bear trap, and I actually believe that the second half of this year is going to attract a lot of attention to the dollar, and hopefully that's the last leg down in gold. I think that'll send gold lower, and I think it'll be brief, but I think it'll be violent.
When you say breakdown and you say brief and violent, can you quantify at all what you're looking for? Obviously, that could scare some people, but maybe you're not talking about a huge move.
Well, you know, I think if we look at a chart, right, the past few years, we've been pretty range-bound. I've described it as a ping-pong game between 1,050 on the low end and about 1,373 on the high end. And so I think we're going to have to get close to that 1,050 level. And my hope is that when that happens, it happens within a matter of weeks. You know, I recently listened to an interview with Peter Schiff, and he mentioned that he was expecting $50 and $100 moves for gold here soon. And of course, he was referring to the upside. And I agree that eventually we're going to see those, but I actually think that we need to see a couple of weeks of that type of volatility in the gold market to shake out all the weak hands, one last shaking of the tree, and give it the energy it needs to actually break through that mid-1370 level, 1374, 1375. We need to do that convincingly before we have the energy for a nice run up to the 1450 level.
Gerardo, now that you've shared your perspective on gold, and without giving away what you talk about in your newsletter, you have been pretty bullish on certain commodities that are in upward trends for reasons of demand. Part of that probably being the EV space, anything in the electrification space. Can you talk about the commodities that you're most excited about at this moment in time?
Absolutely. I like to joke that I'm a pretty simple guy, and I think oftentimes we overcomplicate things. If you keep it simple, this investing and speculating thing really isn't that difficult. We can disagree on whether or not we have a bull market in gold and silver, and whether or not gold and silver need to break down before they break out, and that's all fair. But what's clear to me is, if I look at a 5-year chart of copper or a 5-year chart of zinc, we're in a bull market for those metals. I really like the base metals, despite the recent consolidation, which I think it's healthy, and I think it's in part because of the Chinese New Year. And then I also like lithium. So, in the newsletter, the past 6 months, we've definitely upped our copper and zinc exposure. And we have one of what I think is the premier lithium junior in the space right now in the newsletter. Lastly, I'll add, I think 2018 is a pivotal year for uranium. Anytime you have the major producers that are providing the market with the type of pounds, the quality pounds that the market needs to continue moving, when they start announcing that these prices aren't sustainable and they're willing to make significant cuts and continue to make significant cuts until the price reacts, I think the writing's on the wall. Again, I don't have to be, the best connected insider to know that if those companies are telegraphing further cuts, 2018 is likely going to be a very, very important year for uranium. And a lot of the gains are made initially. And I think that this recent correction in the uranium stocks is a phenomenal opportunity to position yourself in some of the better uranium names.
Absolutely. And not to sidetrack, I've seen some research in the past. I don't remember where it was from, but it's very rare for a commodity or any asset class to go into a 6-year bear market. 5-year bear markets are rare as is. 6 years are almost unheard of. And then 7 years are absolutely unheard of. And I think uranium's probably between that 6 and 7 year period at this point. So it seems like an inevitability that it has to turn sooner than later.
I absolutely agree, Colin. I think it's definitely a matter of when and not if. And again, let's just keep it simple. Let's say I'm wrong. Maybe it's not 2018. Maybe 2018 is another year where uranium bull hopefuls, are just sitting on the sidelines, scratching their heads, wondering what's going on. If it's the first quarter of 2019 and you position yourself 6 months too early, I guarantee you'll be happy that you initiated those positions in 2018. So it's all a matter of perspective, right? You need to define your timeline, define your risk tolerance, and really be clear about the type of investor and speculator that you are.
The nickel price has been very strong, and this can be said for several of the base metals over the last few weeks and months. And yet, at certain times, like right now, the nickel stocks, many of them have actually been going down at the same time that nickel is making new recent highs. And that makes me think that at some point it's going to snap back and the money will come into the resource stocks. Have you noticed that as well? And is that getting you excited for when these stocks kind of snap into place?
Again, absolutely. No, I agree with you 100%, Colin. I think if you even look at some of the base metal plays, there's very few that have reacted as if copper and zinc were in a bull market. And I think for me, Rick Rule has a famous saying that a precursor to a bull market is you want to start positioning yourself, if you have the access, to get into deals where you have the upside of a warrant, right? Which of course gives you the right but not the obligation to buy future shares at a predetermined price. It gives you the leverage. So I think this is the time, whether you're participating in or buying stock in the market through your brokerage account, this is the time to start adding to those positions, because the juniors definitely have not kept up. Whether it's base metals, we can talk nickel, we can talk copper, we can talk zinc. Now the uranium stocks, they had a bit of a run, and now they've consolidated pretty well. But I think we're entering a bull market in everything very soon. I think the blue chip stocks, the U.S. indices, the base metal markets, the lithium market, the precious metals market soon. We're not there yet, but I think the next year or two are going to see some of the most spectacular gains that I've seen in my lifetime.
Last commodity-specific question on copper you've brought up. It has industrial use, obviously, across many different sectors. It's a huge market for a commodity, but it also has crossover into everything going on with EVs and electrification. Talk to our listeners a bit about why you're so bullish on copper.
I think, and I wrote about this last year to subscribers of Junior Mining Monthly. Last year I was writing about the fact that it's very underreported, and it's not so much so now, but about a year ago it was, how much copper actually goes in to an electric vehicle. When you throw in the poor state of infrastructure on a global scale, not just here in the U.S. where I'm based out of Austin, Texas, but if you look at globally the amount of infrastructure that's needed just to bring it up to acceptable standards, the amount of copper that will go into that is the numbers excite me, because if I'm right about half of my copper picks, we're going to do phenomenally well in this copper bull market, especially in light of the fact that share price performance for the most part on the junior coppers hasn't kept up with the surge in copper prices. So I think copper, of all the metals right now, along with zinc, are the two metals that I'm most bullish on. And then the third, of course, has to be lithium for the same reasons, right? The electrification of everything is a mega trend that is in the early stages. I would say we're in the second to third inning, if we're going to use a baseball metaphor, of this mega trend.
Great. Well, Gerardo, I know that people pay you to get your opinions, but you told me before you'd be happy to share at least a couple companies that you're really interested in or focused on in the resource space right now. So feel free to go ahead and share with us those ideas.
Sure. I'll give you some companies that I think provide excellent exposure in the copper space. I think my top pick right now would have to be Almadex Minerals. That's ticker symbol AMZ. The company is run by Morgan Poliquin, who continues to deliver discovery after discovery. Almadex was spun out of Almaden Minerals after Almaden made their Ixtaca discovery in Puebla. And so because that was an asset that deserved to stand alone, they spun out all the assets. Almadex subsequently has made a discovery at the El Cobre project. The project is called El Cobre, and that's turning into a copper gold discovery that I think is going to be significant. And frankly, it wouldn't surprise me if Morgan and the team at Almadex spun out the remaining assets and royalties, some excellent exploration properties, and isolated the El Cobre asset, because I believe it merits standalone status, and I don't believe that the company is getting very much credit for the exploration properties or the royalty aspect of the portfolio. So Almadex Minerals would definitely be one of my top picks in the copper space. Two other ones that are interesting, I think the next copper producer in the U.S. is going to be a company called Excelsior, ticker symbol MIN. They just raised, I believe, approximately $30 million. They're based out of Arizona. They're in the middle of federal permitting, which what can go wrong there, right? But I think if you look at the net present value of their project and you look at their current market cap and the fact that they're this close from permits, assuming that all goes well, there's tremendous upside there. They're targeting production for late this year, early next year. And so if they're able to execute on that, and then if you want to look at something a bit more high risk, and this is a sponsor on the website, so full disclosure, but Chilean Metals is very interesting to me. They have very, very prospective properties in Chile and Nova Scotia, and they also have this very interesting royalty deal with Teck. It's an option for Teck to exercise, but I believe because of the fundamentals and the fact that we are in a copper bull market and they need the pound, I actually think they're going to go ahead and elect to exercise that option, which for a company like Chilean, which again has a market cap of about $8 million, so it's definitely high risk, right? Your risk is liquidity. The upside though is pretty compelling to me, so that's an interesting one to me.
Excellent. Well, Gerardo, thank you so much for coming on the program. Happy we got you on here finally, and looking forward to getting you back on the program at some point soon. Once again, for our listeners, Gerardo is the editor of Junior Mining Monthly, as well as Junior Mining Trader, and also co-owner of Resource Stock Digest. Thanks, Gerardo.
Colin, I appreciate your time. Thanks for having me.
Think you understand the junior mining sector, and you think that the participants in the mining sector, junior mining sector, are good people and kind people, hit the bid.
How violent that term could be, it actually could be quite violent. It could be a rip your face off uranium rally.
And the world is always going to need raw materials. It's going to need copper and gold and nickel and so forth.
Totally destabilized. Hey, Troll, did you hear what's going on in Yemen?